So we're starting here in line 370, and we can start with this word primus, meaning first, and then we have an ablative absolute coming up. So first of all, we can translate magna caterva. So magna is big or great. Caterva is a crowd or a throng. And then those are both ablative. And then going with those is danaum, which is genitive plural. It's a third declension genitive plural, meaning of Danaans. So with a great crowd of Danaans, and then here is the ablative participle comitante, which means accompanying. And you can see from the NT in the ending there that it's a present participle. So first, with a great throng of Danaans accompanying, and then we get our subject. We know that we're going to have a masculine singular subject because of the adjective primus, and here he is, androgeos. In fact, it's a long O, so androgeos. And then the main verb offert, which means presents or offers. And the object is the reflexive pronoun se in the previous line, so presents himself to us. So nobis is the dative case of nos. So first, with a great throng of Danaans accompanying, androgeos presents himself to us. And the context here is that Aeneas and his fellow Trojans are there, they're on the streets of Troy somewhere, and then they encounter this Greek man, this Danaan man called Androgeos, with some of his fellow Greeks. And then we have this another present participle, credains. So remember, in the nominative singular, the ending is ns for a present participle. So credains, and this is masculine nominative singular, so it's referring back to this man, this androgeos. So believing, and then he's inscius, believing unaware. And now we have socia agmina. Now, this is basically a really compressed indirect statement. So we have to imagine the words nos and esse, right? So believing, nos esse, believing that we are socia agmina. Socia means allied, and agmina means ranks. So believing unaware that we are allied ranks. In other words, Androgeos thinks that Aeneas and his companions are his fellow Greeks, when in fact they are not. They're actually his enemies, the Trojans. Right. Okay. And atque. Ultro is an adverb which means spontaneously. So spontaneously, he addresses us, compellat. Again, subject is still androgeos. He addresses us with amicis verbis. Now, amicus here is an adjective, and it's agreeing with verbis in the ablative plural. So he addresses us with friendly words. And then we go into direct speech, and we start with a plural imperative, and those always end in a te. So amate, monete, regite, audite, capite, that kind of thing. So festinate, he says, hurry, men. So viri must be then vocative plural. Hurry, men. For, nam, for, quae segnities, what idleness is delaying you, moratur. Just remember these two verbs that look very similar to each other. Morior, with an I in the middle, means I die, whereas moror, without the I in the middle, means to delay somebody. So for what idleness is delaying you, and we imagine the object vos, what idleness is delaying you, tam sera, so late. And sera here is an adjective agreeing with segnities, that's why it's feminine. So what idleness is delaying you so late. In other words, he thinks they're fellow Greeks and he's saying, why are you being so slow to come into Troy from the ships and get in on this action of plundering and sacking the city of Troy? And then he continues in this vein. He says, alii, others, are rapiunt, are plundering, and quae ferunt, literally are carrying. But I think here carrying means sort of carrying stuff away, so therefore perhaps pillaging would be a good translation. Others are plundering and pillaging. And then the object is incensa Pergama. Now, incensa is a PPP, perfect passive participle, so having been burned. And then Pergama, essentially, it's a plural noun, but it basically means Troy. Technically, Pergama is the citadel of Troy, the sort of defended high point of Troy, but really it's being used here to refer to the whole city. So others are plundering and pillaging burned Troy. And then he addresses them with wos, right? You guys, are you going? So etis, this is the second person plural from the verb eo, meaning I go. So are you going now, nunc, for the first time, primum, a Celsis navibus, from the tall ships. So Celsis, tall, and navibus, ships. So he's basically saying, are you only now arriving from the ships? Why are you taking so long? And then we finish his speech, and we get then dixit, the verb, so that means he spoke. And et ex templo, this is an adjective. It's nothing to do with temples. It's an adjective that, it's an adverb that means suddenly. So it's just like subito, right? Suddenly, or rather, sorry, not suddenly, immediately. So rather than being like subito, it's like statim, sorry. So immediately. And then we go into brackets here. So for, which is enim, enim is just like nam, right? It means for, introducing an explanation. For, fida satis responsa. Now, fida means kind of reassuring, trustworthy. Satis means enough. Responsa means replies or responses. And then neque, this is a negative, right? It's like known, means not. And then dabantur means were being given, right? Imperfect passive of the verb do. And you can see from the BA in the middle that it's imperfect tense, right? It's the active is just dabant, but then adding ur on the end makes it passive. So this whole bit in brackets means for reassuring enough replies were not being given. In other words, Androgeos is standing there, he's speaking to them, and then they're just staring at him in silence, and that's what makes him realize that they are not, in fact, his fellow Greeks who would reply to him immediately, therefore they must be his enemies, the Trojans. Right, so he spoke, and immediately, for assuring enough replies were not being given, he understood, seinsit, which is just like intellexit in this context. He understood having fallen, de lapsus. Right, this is a perfect active participle from a deponent verb, de labor. So he understood having fallen. In other words, he understood that he had fallen. This is a sort of unusual kind of indirect statement. He understood that he had fallen in medios hostis. This is in plus accusative, into the middle of the enemy. Now, hostis here is accusative, right? Same as medios, but it's this unusual poetic ending. So in the normal piece of Latin text in prose, it would be hostes, right? Medios hostes. So he understood that he had fallen into the middle of the enemy. Right. Then next sentence begins in line 378 with a main verb, obstipuit, he was dazed, and que. And then we have retro. Retro, a bit like how we use that word in English, it means backwards. And I think we have to add in a participle here to make full sense of the Latin. So I would say something like drawing backwards for retro, right? He was dazed, and drawing backwards, he repressit, he restrained, as in the word repress in English, he restrained his foot, pedem, cum vocet, together with his voice. So you've got cum plus ablative there. In other words, so the Latin says he restrained his foot with his voice. In other words, he stopped moving and he stopped speaking. That's the point. And then, with this word veluti in line 379, this is a word a bit like qualis that we saw earlier, which introduces a simile. So it means just as, or just like. And then the next word I would translate is qui, right? Just as somebody who, right? Just as somebody who has pressit, has crushed, and then the object is improvisum anguem. Improvisum is the adjective that means unexpected, and anguem is the noun meaning a snake, right? So just as someone who has crushed an unexpected snake or serpent, now here we don't actually have the word in the Latin, we just sort of imagine it or supply it from the fact that aspris and centibus are ablative case, right? This sometimes happens in Latin poetry, that the case alone is doing the work of the preposition followed by that case. So here the ablative is equivalent to in plus ablative. So just as one who has crushed an unexpected serpent in the rough briars, right? So aspris meaning rough, centibus meaning briars. So in the rough briars. Stepping, so nitains is a present participle, hence the ns at the end. Stepping on the ground, humi, that's a locative form, stepping on the ground. So just to go over that very quickly again, just as someone who has crushed an unexpected serpent in the rough briars when stepping, that's nitains, on the ground. And, que, we're still in the simile here, and repente, suddenly, so that's the same meaning as extemplo before, and indeed subito. So suddenly alarmed, trepidus, right? Suddenly alarmed. He refugit, he flees from it. And then the object of refugit is attolentem, which you can see from the nt in the middle that this is a present participle, right? He flees from it as it raises, right? Attolentem, as it raises or raising its wrath or anger, iras, which grammatically is plural, but we can translate it as singular, raising its wrath, and et puffing up or swelling up to mentem, another present participle with nt in the middle, puffing up its kairula, deep blue, kolla, neck. And again, grammatically kolla is the plural, but I would translate it as singular. So just to quickly go through that again. So veluti, just as, qui, somebody who, pressit, has crushed, improvisum anguem, an unexpected serpent, aspris centibus, in the rough briars, nitains, when stepping, humi, on the ground, and, que, meaning and, repente trepidus, suddenly alarmed, refugit, attolentem, flees from it as it raises its wrath, iras, et tumentem, and puffing up its kairula kolla, its deep blue neck. And then in the next line, 382, we come out of the simile again with this phrase haud secus. Haud means not, secus means otherwise. So not otherwise, i.e. in a very similar way. Androgeos, and then agreeing with him is tremefactus, which means shaken. And then visu is ablative of visus, so it means by the sight. So not otherwise, androgeos, shaken by the sight, was going away. Abibat, that's the imperfect tense of ab-eo, and you can recognize the imperfect from the ba there. I might translate abibat rather than was going away. I might say was trying to go away, just because he actually doesn't succeed. So sometimes the imperfect tense means that somebody was trying to do something but didn't manage it. Okay, so then we can go into the next line here. So in ruemus means we attack. And then we have an ablative phrase, densis armis, with dense weapons, or with close-packed weapons. We circumfundimur, we surround him. Right, the we, remember, refers to Aeneas, the narrator, and his Trojan friends. So we surround him. Literally, this is a present passive. So we are poured around him. But I would say we surround him. And quae. And then the next main verb is sternimus. We slay them. And we can imagine the object, like eos or something. We slay them. Passim is an adverb that means sort of here and there. We slay them here and there. Ignorant, ignaros. Now, ignaros is accusative, so it must refer to the object, the Greeks, not to the subject, which is the Trojans. So we slay them here and there, ignorant of the place, loci. So that's genitive. And captos, et captos, and having been seized, so that's a PPP, perfect passive participle, having been seized by terror. So formidine is ablative case, by terror, right? So we slay them here and there, ignorant of the place and seized by terror. And of course, these Greeks are ignorant of the place because they are not the locals. They are the invaders, whereas the Trojans know the place much better. It's their own home. So finally, after the semicolon, in line 385, the subject is fortuna, fortune. Aspirat, now this means something like breathes favourably upon, or you could just say favours if you like. Fortune breathes favourably upon, and this verb takes dative, breathes favourably upon our primo labori, our first effort. Right, so in other words, the Trojans' attack on the Greeks at this moment goes very well. Fortune breathes favourably upon our first effort.